Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Mark is here with you for Arcadia Economics. Looks like some new cash was doled out today, which is exciting. We'll pull up the latest update on the exciting Senate infrastructure plan, which hit a setback. These guys have been duking out these infrastructure plans for decades. You know, it always hits a setback, which usually just brings the amount more. Seems perplexing to me, but fortunately, to make sense out of all that, I am joined by Galen McNamara of Summa Silver, one of the people responsible for getting silver out of the ground. He also runs a company, which means he actually speaks to investors that care about making or losing money. And Galen, first of all, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Chris. It's always great to join you on the show. And just in your preliminary comments there with the new infrastructure spending, the new stimulus, I didn't get any of that. Did you?
I did not. I'm wondering if I can submit some of my losses from the silver tamp down to the Fed's discount window. I guess one other question I had for you, Galen, because I mentioned that you have shareholders that care about making or losing money, which adds a layer of complexity into these things because, and it's interesting, stocks are flat following an unexpected jump in jobless claims, which is a bit of a conundrum. I know people are actually trying to hire people who are struggling to do that, yet there's more jobless claims. I've heard several people directly tell me they know people who are getting paid more to sit home and do nothing. And I wonder how you extrapolate all that back to the silver market, where we see silver at $25 and let's call it 45-ish cents. Still about half of the 1980 high. And there we have the treasury yield is pretty low. I believe it's around 1.2% today, 1.26%. Inflation is over 5% now, which would be a negative yield in my math. What would you tell to people who are a little nervous about silver, saying, hey, I don't think the manipulation is ever going to end, but they look at the alternatives? What are they left with?
There's so many ways to win in silver. Whether you look at, the inflation thing is one, but if you take a generational approach, which is, one of the strategies that even I take, it's that, okay, well, the silver I buy today, if the US dollar continues to devalue, I mean, an ounce of silver today is still going to be an ounce of silver tomorrow, but it might have a lot more purchasing power than our fiat dollars do, number one. Number two, silver is industrially is this almost stealthy ESG metal, where if you look at how much silver is going to need to go into all of these new initiatives to support the new green economy, all of the electric cars that are going to come out in the next couple decades, with economies and governments really mandating that change from gas to electric. I just see it as a metal with so many ways to win, and one that if you look at, compare it to many or all of the other commodities, is nowhere close to its highs and is generally underneath the gains of a lot of the other commodities, especially if you compare them to the all-time highs. So for me, there's ways to win now, there's ways to win later, there's ways to win because of industrial usage, there's ways to win because of inflation, and at the same time, there's ways to win because our dollar continually loses purchasing power. So for me, that's kind of all I need to know, and it doesn't get much better than that, really.
Would you say that this is, and again, not legal financial advice, but the position we're in today is an eventual higher silver price, as much as one could say something like this is possible? Is that more certain than the housing bubble was to implode in 2008?
Oh, I would say, I mean, yes, absolutely. Absolutely, a higher silver price is very, very likely. And of course, that's just my opinion, but I would bet on that for sure.
Well, Galen, you talked about some of the Green New Deal. I mean, here, bipartisan infrastructure plan that could get another chance after Senate setback. I have a feeling that it'll get at least one more chance. All these things that they're going to spend money on, climate change, infrastructure, God only knows what that actually means. Maybe it's something other than those stated reasons. Revamp transportation, broadband, utility. These are things that are going to involve silver. Am I right?
Absolutely, they are. And think about even things like solar panels. Think about newer electronics. And the point I made earlier about electric cars, I mean, for me, that could be the game changer. How many of these cars are going to be manufactured in the next couple decades? It's certainly millions and millions and millions and millions. And personally, I don't own an electric car. I have a gas car, but I could see the next car that we buy as a family could easily be an electric car. Probably not a Tesla, but there's going to be a lot of options coming up very soon.
Well, I hear you. And actually, I don't know if this is just fate or irony here, but what would you say if in that same article we have a quote from Butt Geek on infrastructure saying, not trying to get gold-plated water pipes, just ones without lead. And I don't know, maybe there's some way silver can help the water pipes as well. I mean, it looks like precious metals are on people's minds here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Silver-plated water pipes, on the other hand, who knows? I don't know. But yeah, again, when you think about the age of most of our infrastructure, especially in large cities, it shouldn't be anything. It shouldn't be anything controversial to say, hey, we don't want lead in the pipes, or hey, we want bridges that aren't going to collapse, or there just hasn't been that investment in infrastructure in the last several decades, and now it looks like we might get it. So yes, it will be with printed money. So I mean, you're increasing inflationary tactics or inflationary pressures there anyways, but maybe some good can come of this, and things can be updated.
Yeah, and speaking of things that perhaps could be updated, I would suggest Joe Biden's economic gauges and ideology could be added to that list, because here, interesting, mind-blowing article from Zero Hedge. Joe Biden, he's an economist now too, downplays inflation, predicts businesses will be in a bind over labor shortages, then according to this article has a brain freeze. But let's stick to the economic aspect here in the silver world, because President Biden waved off long-term inflation concerns. Just bye-bye, just waved them off. You got the money for the infrastructure plan, or that's on process, but you can just wave off the inflation. Kind of like how banks wave off their losses after they melt down the global economy and get a bailout from the Fed. But Economic Joe says there will be near-term inflation because the economy is recovering. Yet he added that most economists think it's highly unlikely that it's going to be long-term inflation that's going to get out of hand. Now, you're not an economist. You're actually running a business that has real things on the line, not just useless economic projections. But he says most economists think it's highly unlikely, although, again, Jamie Dimon, not actually an economist, but running JP Morgan, and he's actually hoarding cash because there's a very good chance inflation is here to stay. So what would you make of this discrepancy?
I would say, first of all, anecdotally, the only people that I've heard calling inflation transitory are people in the media, people on the news, people who I don't know. Everyone I've talked to personally is very concerned. So what does that mean? It's at this point, do they actually believe, the people on the news in charge, do they actually believe it's transitory, or is this just a story? That's number one. Number two, again, anecdotally from our experience, running a business and needing to, buy things, needing to have supply of things to operate, even in exploration, there's certain key components that we need to explore, that we need to drill, that the prices have gone up on 50%, 100%, and good luck even getting them. You got to wait a month to get it, then you got to pay double, and then you're happy to do it, because if you don't take that component, and what I'm talking about is like drill steel, casing and rods and pipe for drilling is a specific example. But if you don't write that check, well, there's 10 other guys waiting behind you to do that. So none of this adds up to me personally. And I just don't see how it's possible that someone can get on the news, or a leader like a Biden to get up there and say, hey, everything's transitory and actually mean it. It makes much more sense to me that we're being led down some kind of garden path.
Galen, if that's the case, I'm guessing you're going to have you put your seatbelt on so you don't fall over your chair when you hear some of the latest analysis from the Federal Reserve, the group of banks that is tasked with artificially controlling and dominating the global economy through the abusive privileges of the world's reserve currency. Because here we see June inflation jumped 5.4% from a year ago. And I might add, they say from a year ago, which wouldn't seem so transitory. I mean, I don't know like what kind of time length you need there. Now, all those guys that follow these, old school fuddy-duddies like Milton Friedman, where inflation is always everywhere and it's a monetary phenomenon, were corrected by Jerome Powell when he said that the money supply, specifically M2, doesn't really have any important implications. Now, Jamie Dimon disagrees with him that inflation is transitory. What say you, Galen McNamara?
To answer your question, Chris, does that make sense to me? Well, to me, it's very simple. You don't need to be an economist to understand this, and that if there's unlimited money in the system, our dollar is going to be worth less and less over time. I mean, to me, that's just very simple. So to say that one isn't related to the other, and to say that money supply isn't related to inflation after we've printed record amounts of dollars in the last 2 years, record amounts. It's crazy. It's like we're living in the Twilight Zone. And you wake up every morning and wonder, how could this be true, right?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. And like you mentioned, Galen, the experts, the press, and the bond vigilantes were as quick to unlearn monetarism, if they had ever learned it, as Mr. Powell, because reporting about U.S. inflation rarely even contains the words money supply. Instead, we are repeatedly told that the most recent upticks in inflation are anomalous and transitory. But now we see, since March of 2020, M2 has been growing at an average annualized rate of 23.9%, the fastest since World War II. And we certainly had that was even more inflation than we had during the 70s and 80s, if I recall that chart I looked at the other day correctly. So,
yeah.
Galen, is this simply a case where if we look and use common sense in our own eyes and don't listen to people who have a long track record of lying to you to try and take your money, that you can get the truth? And if you're able to have the patience to wait these bozos out until the thing collapses upon them, which I think is happening at an increasingly accelerating rate, but in a world where you have stock market bubbles hitting new all-time highs and negative yielding treasuries, at least, is that a fair way for people to look at it?
Yeah, and absolutely, and the other point I would make there is that we all know that history repeats itself. So there's been multiple throughout history, perhaps the best known being the Weimar Republic, where, you see currency devalued, and the government is telling us the same thing that the German government told the German people in the 30s, I just don't see how the end result is going to be any different. So with that in mind, we can do nothing or act accordingly.
Well, Galen, I appreciate you said that. That's one of the things I love about having you on the show. You say the truth. And I know there's some people who don't like hearing certain things, but you look at the history of the Bush family with Brown Brothers Harriman, and you see these families that have existed in power and set a lot of things up. And perhaps we'll leave that part there, but that has a lot to do with why I left the U.S., why I focus on silver, because you can see a lot of things that are certainly very shocking happening, yet I guess all we can do is make the best of it and plan ahead, which fortunately is one of the things that you've done quite well, because all right, fine. Governments do this, bankers do that. They create wars so they can get people in debt. It is not ideal. But what we have control over is, where's this headed? What can you do about it? And that's what you've been doing with Summa Silver. And I like the combo you have here. Summa drills almost 12,000 grams per ton silver equivalent. And then 2 weeks before that, you had increased the size of the property that just hit quite a nice drill result. So what could you share about all that?
Yeah. So we were very, very happy to share those drill results yesterday. And just to put things in context, when you see something like that, 12,000 grams per ton, I can use the word bonanza grade, I think, very comfortably. And anytime I think you have something that's over 10,000 grams per ton, it's very special. So although it's not something that we sit back and pat ourselves on the back over because we have a really hot drill hole, it validates our ideas. It validates the concept, and it inspires us to continue to keep our foot on the gas pedal with what we're doing and continue to be aggressive.
Yeah, and Galen, especially with a lot of people, I think, rapidly coming into the silver sector because they do see what's happening with inflation. Can you put that in perspective? All right, 12,000, almost 12,000 grams per ton silver equivalent. So for someone who might be new to mining stocks, something you could compare it to or help frame the context for people so they can understand what that actually means.
That type of grade is, all other things being equal, in an underground mine, is probably 20 times higher than what you would need to make a profitable go of it. So it's very, very high grade. It compares extremely well with the best grades, the best holes drilled on any silver focused project anywhere in the world in recent memory. And the comparison I do like to make is that hole, when you see these headline holes in these news releases for companies, well, that hole would be a headline for other companies with market capitalizations far in excess of ours. We're sitting at 60 or 70 million dollars Canadian. Well, a company that has, $1 billion market cap, a $500 million market cap, that would be a headline for them too. And they're hundreds of holes into their projects. This is only the 30th hole on ours. So it's a very, very strong start. We've still got a lot of work to do. But when you take companies like, I'll just throw out some examples, like a Vizsla Resources like a year ago, a Silvercrest Mines 4 or 5 years ago. If you could rewind back in time and become a shareholder in that company then, would you do it? And okay, well, obviously the answer is yes. So that's where my mind is at. We're at that point in the cycle now, in the discovery cycle. So that's why I'm so excited about it, because I just see I see a bright future.
Well, it's certainly a great start what you've got there. We talked about the reasons why it would seem at some point the spot price of silver as a commodity is going to rise as well. So where does that leave us? What do you need to check off the list? What are the things that can delay things, get in the way that you're mitigating against? What do people have to keep in mind so they can follow going forward and see how you do?
Well, what we need to do now is really see what we have on our hands on this project and on our other project. So what we'll be focusing on this year is really just drilling, more holes, really chase that ultra high grade, really go after high grade on our other project. And if you look at the history of a lot of these companies, that drill phase is when you see a lot of valuation increase. You see a lot of upside from there. So in my mind, that's the position we're at now, and that's what we're going to push going forward. Is just to use a cliche, is drill baby drill, and that's really my mantra and our mantras for the foreseeable future. But in terms of hey, what could get in our way, what could stop us? You do look at these supply chain issues with things like drill steel, but there's also labor issues now, in that good people to work on drilling rigs are very difficult to find. And a lot of the contractors, because none of us exploration companies or even mining companies typically have drills that we own. It's a utility. You wouldn't drill a well on your farm if you wanted water, right? So these companies now, these contractors, are having a very difficult time finding and retaining people, because times are so good. And this is always the situation in markets like this. And when things get busy in exploration, which they're very busy right now, you go from kind of depressed when there's not too much going on and there's no shortage of anything, to very busy when it's the opposite. There's shortages of everything and you can't find anybody to work. And that happens like that, it happens within a couple months. So it's very hard for a business like a drilling contractor to really like sustain something over a long amount of time and really plan for that. So that's one of the issues just that we're facing generally as an industry. But for us, we're lucky in that we've planned very far ahead. It's not like we're just trying to flip a switch and get to work. There's a lot of legwork that goes into this over months and months before you even get out there and start drilling holes. So we've done that and we're prepared. There's always curveballs that come at you, but hey, you take them one at a time, and at the end of the day, you work it out.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and that's one of the things I've really appreciated as I've been learning from you. Because, all right, like there's some companies I talk to where the geologist is focused on getting the stuff out of the ground, yet there's all these different parts to it. And to me, I think that's what that's what caught my eye initially about Keith Newmeyer. All right, 10 years ago, all right, the guy's going after a lot of silver, and he realizes something's happening in the marketplace. So I appreciate you sharing those things because they do all add up. I mean, that all contributes to profit margin, and it's nice
Yeah.
when someone has a handle on all those different aspects. Galen, before we wrap up today, anything else folks should be aware about the company or going on, or any other exciting news?
Yeah, like I was saying, there's going to be a lot of news coming up, a lot of drilling results coming up, a lot of us just advancing our projects and really getting down to work. So we have a singular focus right now, and that's execution. It's execution at site, it's execution in the markets. It's really showing people what we can do. So that's it, Chris.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, Galen, you are not a licensed financial advisor, which personally is a big plus in my mind. But again, so people, you need to contact your legal FINRAs and all that stuff. But just in terms of like who to call, maybe to get some info, if folks think it's a little bizarre that the man in charge of the world's reserve currency thinks M2 or the money supply is irrelevant and, doesn't even look at it. And there are some people who think, wow, maybe someone who actually is incorporating all these things into a business plan and getting silver out of the ground in this current environment, if they'd like more information or have more questions, or if they want to have a financial planner or someone who is licensed to do that on their behalf, what would be the best way to get those questions answered?
Well, I think the best way to do that would be to contact us, contact me. The contact info is up there on the website you're showing now, but we're also on Twitter. At Summa Silver on Twitter, and I'm also on Twitter at Galen McNamara, and I respond to messages, and I'm generally very approachable. So please contact me anytime.
Well, I appreciate that, Galen, and we'll look forward to having you back on the show in the near future. Keep us posted and explain some of these things that even the president of the United States seems flummoxed to understand. Fortunately, you do understand inflation and how people can protect their money against that. So I appreciate you and all that you stand for, and look forward to catching up again soon.
Yeah, Chris, it's always great to come on. It's always great to catch up, and I'm looking forward to it.